Hello, this is Dale Matthews. This is Inside News. This is Mike Jones. This is your show. This is Josephine County. It's the universe, all those things. Hello, Mike.
It's a lot to cover in 45 minutes.
It's universal recognition around here that we are the place to go if you want to find out what's going on in local politics, and this is the time of year for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So what we review media as well, you know that, including ourselves. And so we did that last night. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this important meeting that happened on Wednesday, where the commissioners just flatly turned down an easy prospect to help fund the sheriff's department. They chose not to, and the sheriff didn't show up. And the people who've been pushing for levies and et cetera, with one exception, weren't there. And it really does seem to indicate that this would be one of the solutions to this problem, but they don't want to do it. And we've laid out a plan to you, a very clear plan how we could get to 6 deputies for 5 years out of this money. They don't want to do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit tonight about the Courier's version of this story. You already know what KJO's version is. We told you some appointments were made to boards, advisory boards, and that's really all that happened at that meeting. The Courier has a more complete version, but it's got that special twist to it. It's similar to when Sean Hall from the Courier, who's now taken the role of Jim Moore, 3 times he talked to me about my candidacy, and all 3 times he was arguing with me. Well, you're wrong about this, and this ought to be done. And hey, who's being interviewed here? Why are you telling me I'm wrong? Aren't you a reporter? This is the Courier. So Mike and I are going to go through the article. Mike's going to start it off, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Courier's version of what happened on Wednesday. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, road dollars won't be going to the sheriff's office yet. By Sean Hall. The Josephine County Board of Commissioners revised the county budget on Wednesday, but not before there was an unsuccessful push to infuse the sheriff's office with $1 million in federal road money.
For the second oh, go ahead, bud.
No, yeah, it's fine.
Okay, we were going to jump back and forth. For the second year in a row, County Budget Committee member Margaret Goodwin suggested that money received last June from the federal government be spent on rural patrols, but she was voted down 5-1 by the rest of the committee. Yeah, well, that's close to true. Go ahead.
Yes. All 3 county commissioners who also sit on the committee then voted 3-0 on a supplemental budget that did not include Goodwin's suggestion. The budget needed updating to reflect revenue received since the current budget was adopted last spring.
Quote, many people in this community believe we are in a public safety emergency, Goodwin said during a special committee meeting held Wednesday at the Ann Basker Auditorium. If we have an emergency, a real emergency, we would be allocating every available resource to deal with it.
Goodwin's comments followed a recent suggestion by County Commissioner Cheryl Walker that the county seek state aid to deal with a public safety fiscal emergency. Budget reductions in 2012 have cut deeply into the sheriff's office patrols, investigations, and jail operations, with the department at a staffing level nearly half of what it was 4 years ago. The county's juvenile detention and shelter facility also closed.
The money that Goodwin wanted to use was received last June from the U.S. Department of Agriculture as a result of congressional reauthorization of the Secure Rural Schools Act. The legislation stipulates the money is to be used for roads, but state law permits it also to be used for sheriff's patrols.
Goodwin was unsuccessful in a similar proposal she made last spring when the money was expected but not yet in hand. Several community members at the meeting criticized the Board of Commissioners for not agreeing with Goodwin.
Former Commissioner Sandy Casanelli, who is seeking election to the board in the May primary, told board members they were choosing roads over deputies. Quote, "It's a fictitious crisis you are making," Casanelli said. "Shame on you."
However, Bill Ertl, also a commissioner candidate, praised the committee, saying the subject could soon be revisited. "I applaud the committee for not being scared or hijacked," he said.
This is an interesting point here. There were several people in the audience who were running for commissioner. There were a lot of people who had things to say. It was a fairly contentious issue, but the Courier decided only to quote two people, making it sound like, well, it was kind of an even split. It was not an even split, was it, Mike?
No, I wouldn't say that it was.
County Commissioner Simon Hare said he expected the subject to be taken up again when the Budget Committee begins meeting in 2 weeks to review the county budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1.
It's appropriate during a Budget Committee hearing, Hare said. You need to do that cost-benefit analysis. The 1 million...
Okay, go ahead. We could do it in unison.
Yes.
The $1 million has, for now, been placed in the county's Public Works Road Reserve Fund, which stands at about $2 million. Of course, the Courier's not doing any investigation into why it went from $6 million to $4 million to $2 million, but that's a little too difficult. County Finance Director Arthur O'Hare said after the meeting that he would prefer the fund to be $3 million to $4 million to cover road or bridge emergencies.
Yes, naturally, because that would then take into account this money. And of course, we can't rob from Peter to pay Paul, so that would be really bad.
It's not in Peter's hands yet. How can he be robbed? Go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
Well, according to this article, it is, and that would. But the odd thing is that they say that it's in the Public Works Fund, and that the Public Works Fund is at $2 million. Well, that would lead you to believe that, considering this money, this $1 million that they're talking about, that would then make it $2 million. No, not at all. This $2 million is there. Listen, if the $2 million that's there includes this million, then there's some hanky-panky going on because, as Dale was saying, last year they were saying it was as high as $8 million and possibly as low as 50 cents, whatever. Anyway, when you look at the liability of a major event, a major flood, or something where we would have a catastrophic event, this money would be required in order to fix our infrastructure, he said.
With an adequate reserve in place, the county would not need to borrow money in an emergency. Also, this is not an editorial. Okay, but it's written like one. Also, having a road reserve and general fund reserve means the county has a higher financial rating, so they can borrow money, which would affect interest rates should the county ever need to borrow.
Yes. If our services were down and our ratings were down, it would cost us more money, he said.
If our reserve...
Yeah. Reserve. For 15 years, the Federal Secure Rural Schools Act and its reauthorizations have meant about $1 million a year for county roads and bridges, according to O'Hare.
Now, that's interesting. If we're bringing in $1 million a year, how come since last year the money's going down, 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 and not up at all?
Right. And of course, there's other monies that are going into this fund, like every time you fill up your tank, there's tax on gasoline that I believe ends up in that same account too. So
earlier this month, U.S. Representative Peter DeFazio, Democrat of Oregon, and several colleagues asked the House Appropriations Committee to extend the subsidy for the federal fiscal year beginning in October. This is the same story that the Courier would not tell about why the commissioners were saying there was no activity at all, but they don't want to tell you that story. No action has been taken on that request as of Wednesday. No action.
So what? Whoop, big whoop. Things
Okay,
move
Mike.
slowly there. And listen, here's the bottom line. When you'll see action on this? Spring of 17.
Oh, at the last possible moment, yes.
Yes, of course, because that's
But
how
they
they
have
do
been telling
things.
us there's been no action at all.
Right.
That's part of
If the road reserve was depleted, O'Hare said, it's possible it could be rebuilt by cutting back on roads projects. However, the county already is 15% behind from where it should be with its chip sealing road resurfacing program, he said.
That's interesting because I don't remember Rob Brandis saying that. He said that in a meeting at the Ambassador that we were on track. So, that's
the roads were all in great shape.
Not on track. And we're down millions and millions and millions of dollars. Since 2005, the number of county public works positions, why is this in here, has declined from 67 to 51.
Because, Dale, there's an emergency in the Public Works Department. Don't you see? They need money. And now we're going to have competing emergencies. Which one of these things is more important? Well, you know what? How is Sally going to take her children to school unless she has a road to drive on? So clearly, it's more important that we keep that overage in the Roads and Bridges Fund and not fund law enforcement. Listen, I mean, this is the simplest exposure of the fallacy here, and that is either you have a public safety emergency or you don't. And when you do, you take what is given you, or you take what is available to you to put to use to deal with the emergency. That seems simple to me.
Okay, so that was part one of our review of local media. I'm not even going to touch again on KJO because it's not really local media. All right, so now we move to the county's version. Now you're paying for this video. Please note, just a little personal thing for me. I don't like video where people are looking at you like this, right? I don't think you need all this up here. This is not good television, even though I'm doing it at the moment. It's ridiculous. Okay, but you'll see that the IT department for the county, is it possible that all the pictures on their wall are like this? I mean, these guys can't do it right, not ever. They just recently got the audio finally where you can hear it. And how much did they spend on that, I wonder? We're not going to find out till some of us are in office. How much money did they spend to go out and find someone that could fix this problem they never were able to fix? Even when they were under intense pressure, we can't hear anything. Okay, so we'll find out. Oh, yeah, follow the money. Okay, and who got that contract? And it was a no-bid contract, was it? Okay, so first thing we start off with is this was supposed to be a public hearing. And we're going to play the county's version of the video. So as you can see, a little difference between the way they do things and the way we do things. And Simon Hare starts off by saying, well, this is all just, just administrative stuff. We're kind of required to do this. Well, except that they should be sharing this information with us anyway, shouldn't they? Well, not really. I mean, yeah, it's just all administration stuff. You can now safely go back to sleep. Here's what he had to say.
It's kind of an administrative element to do this here today, but we're required to by our charter, and I think it's important to recognize that we're abiding by that. So thank you.
Any other question or comment from the panel?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. O'Hare. All right. I'm going to open the public hearing for any public comment on this supplemental budget. Is there anyone that wishes to comment?
Not on the agenda.
Close this one. Number 3 is a public hearing on this. Any comments?
This is just for the committee.
Now, wait a minute. This is just for the committee. This is a public hearing. I've never seen them do this, not ever. Not even this group, where there's a public hearing and the public is not being heard from. First, they're going to take the vote, Mike, and then they're going to hear what the public has to say. What the heck? This is like a Cave Junction City Council meeting where first they talk among each other, they take a vote, and then they open it up for the public to say what they think about the vote that they just took.
Nice.
Okay.
Okay. I was out of order.
Yes, you were.
Apologize.
Join the crowd.
There is a
Okay.
need for the Budget Committee to make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners.
Yes.
So there's a proposed motion that codifies the actions that we're supposed to be making today.
Yes.
Okay, this is really interesting to me, okay? Because, you know, I'm interested in politics stuff. What they expected was that the rubber stamp, with one exception, Budget Committee, who we don't get a chance to see, which is lovely, okay? Just the commissioners, the camera centered, well, not centered, but just way down here, on the commissioners, not on the Budget Committee. You won't see them. For some reason, they would not turn the camera over to look at anybody else except for the commissioners. And they were supposed to, what he's saying is, they're now going to take a vote before the public speaks, of course, in the new rules, the new way of doing things. And they expected that there would be a motion to accept this supplementary budget. Done deal. Except there was a little surprise, and they did not hear the motion they expected.
Do you need that motion from the panel? Yes.
I move to amend the 2015-16 Josephine County supplemental budget
Oh, really?
pursuant to ORS 2944711C to include the Title I Forest Service revenue payments that were received last June that were unforeseen at the time that the budget was adopted.
Whoops. Wait a minute. She's not reading from the script, Mike.
Yes. And the room is met with incredulity.
Yeah, they are, because this wasn't what she was supposed to do. This is not what budget members are chosen to do. Why did they pick her? This was a big mistake. They must have thought that somehow she'd go along with them, because I don't recall them ever picking anybody, not ever, that would kind of rock the boat a little bit.
I think they were throwing a token onto the board, and they had no idea what that would ultimately mean.
Well, she's kind of soft spoken, and she doesn't get super excited about anything like anyone else that you know. And maybe they figured, because she's a woman, I don't know. Why would they pick somebody that has these radical ideas? Like, shouldn't it? One of the things she came into there, and the reason that Simon was thanking her at the beginning is, this wasn't even supposed to be discussed. This whole thing about this supplemental money that came in and wasn't put into last year's budget. Well, we'll get around to it. See, it fell through the cracks, didn't it? And she said, well, since we have this and it's not yet gone to Peter, you can't steal it from Peter. Let's spend it on the sheriff. These are all, she was one of the people who was against the levy idea. We were against the levy idea. Everybody else there was super big levy supporters, right? And they don't want to fund the sheriff.
Which is odd, because that's not necessarily representative of the county as a whole. You would think that if they wanted to represent the county, the 3 appointed members of the board would be people that had different leanings than the board itself. But no, it's pretty well stacked, because the Board of County Commissioners makes up half of the Budget Committee. They stacked, the other 2/3 of the appointed board with, their minions. And then they happened to throw in Margaret Goodwin for good measure, and oops.
So she's not making the suggestion that they wanted. They wanted the board to say yes, boom, yes, boom, yes, boom, and that's it. Maybe just one yes, boom. She didn't do that. So she suggested something else. And it's amazing that there was a second to it at all, but they quickly dealt with that. So here's what Morrissey has to say, and just keep in mind, you're not seeing her. Now, we're going to switch over to our camera here pretty soon, but this out of focus goofy thing, this is what you pay for.
Last June, the county received approximately $1 million in Title I Forest Service payments that were not foreseen at the time that the budget was made. Our actual estimate in the budget was that we would receive $51,000 in those payments. State law doesn't require us to report unforeseen revenues in the supplemental budget, but it does suggest it in that statute that I just cited. And there are reasons why I believe that it's important in this particular case to include those revenues in this supplemental budget. These revenues are the specific revenues that HB 4175 allows the county to use for sheriff's patrols. Many people in this county believe...
Now, I know they can move the camera over. I mean, I've operated this thing. I know it's possible. They're just not doing it.
Yeah, listen, you'll find minimum wage workers at all of the local TV stations over there in Medford. You will find minimum wage workers who know how to move cameras around and orchestrate a newscast production. And at Josephine County, behind the curtain, which is right behind where the commissioners are sitting, that's where the production of this broadcast is done by people who are making a hell of a lot more than minimum wage. And yet, this is what we get. They can't even turn the camera over. Listen, they found a couple of camera angles that show the board and show the person at the podium. They are not willing to go any further than that in order to, give us a broadcast that shows that, depicts sort of what took place.
Well, the other thing is that Mike mostly, and a little bit me, we've spent quite a bit of money on getting high definition cameras, right? You're watching high definition right now. The county has spent a fortune on high definition cameras, but they're not installing them. Yeah,
only one of which is installed, and they're still taking a feed from it in not just standard def, but the low end of standard def. I mean, their broadcast, their live broadcast from there is like it's like 320 by 256 or some ridiculously low little dinky little picture that you can't really expand out. There's no full screen option to the thing. It's really, really poorly done. And they're probably paying on a monthly basis some certain amount of money for the upkeep of this video server website.
Yes.
And what they could do is they could just have a basic web page. They could be live streaming this stuff to YouTube and posting it to that web page for free.
And we do it, and we do it for free. And it's really simple. Now I'm frozen. Okay. It's really simple to do this kind of stuff. Really, really simple. Okay. So there's no excuse for the kind of money that we're spending to get this low quality. We're going to switch over our camera in a moment, and you'll see a little bit of a difference.
That we have a public safety emergency, or that we are in imminent danger of having one. And if that's the case, the prudent thing to do
This is our camera.
Is to
thanks, Dale.
Funds to address that emergency in the future. Regardless of how the money is actually allocated, the purpose of a supplemental budget hearing is to provide transparency into the decisions that are made by the county government, the budget decisions, and in the interest of transparency and accountability to the citizens, I believe that it is important to include this money to make citizens aware. The public has a right to know that these funds were received after the budget was adopted, and they are available to be used for public safety.
They really don't have much to say about this. I mean, they did light into her afterwards, but it was like she was presenting in such a low-key method. I had to boost the audio even for her. She was on the same mic as everybody else, but it was there. So what they did was they trotted out once again, after making a presentation, they trotted out Arthur O'Hare to explain to us in very clear terms. You'll see why, oh, this is impossible. Now, I defy any of you to follow the logic on this. It starts out where you're going, okay, and then it morphs and morphs and morphs, and you would think that you were listening to Simon Hare. Here we go.
Those specific funds that that Margaret is talking about were received at the beginning of June in 2015. So it's not appropriate to include them as revenues in the current fiscal year because they were received in the prior fiscal year.
Okay.
They were received and deposited in June of 2015. So they are recorded as revenues in our financial statements as actual receipts, but for budgetary purposes, it was just too late to incorporate them into the budget for the prior year. That would be the 14-15 fiscal year because they were received in June of 15. So it was just too late to incorporate them into the budgeted revenues of the prior fiscal year. However, they are part of the carryover. Everything received in the prior fiscal year becomes part of the fund balance for that year. And so they're included, or they are in the actual financial statements as fund balance for the current fiscal year. Little bit of a timing issue there which is why that makes that the way it is.
It makes it the way it is.
Adjustment, if we were to make an adjustment, would end up being an adjustment to beginning fund balance in the current budget and probably contingency in the current budget. So unless we wanted to actually spend those monies, there's no budgetary impetus to incorporate that into the spending part, unless we wanted to spend that, unless we wanted to meet
that's what we're talking about.
So,
okay, Mike, he teed that one up well for you, buddy.
Well, he's dancing. I mean, he was really, you could see the gears turning in his head. He's talking. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reiterate everything that's happened up to now, so that while I'm doing that, I can think of how I'm going to, say this next to discourage somehow the use of this money for this purpose.
For an emergency. It's an emergency, but
right.
we spend that money.
Yeah. But he's not going to address that. The thing is that this guy here, he's a low rent Simon Hare. He is nowhere near as good. Somebody wrote me in a private message here the other day that Simon is very, very good at throwing up a meaningless cloud of word content, essentially. And, he can do that. He doesn't need to sit there and think about it. He has a plethora of words stacked up that all he has to do is open the gate and they start flying out of his mouth.
A whole portfolio of options from which we can choose, Mike.
Yes. Exactly. And Arthur O'Hare, he was having a little bit of trouble. You could see that, were this a dance, we'd be rating it about a 5. It wasn't very good. They're trying to skate on the idea of using this money for the sheriff. They don't want to do it. The rationale that they had last year, was that, you can't rob from Peter to pay Paul. But that didn't exactly apply in this situation, but that didn't matter to them. They used it anyway. And they needed some more words to cloud the issue a little bit more. And that's why you saw that nice little dance from Arthur O'Hare. And you'll also see, if you were watching the whole thing, you'd see quite a bit of very elegant dancing by Simon Hare.
Yeah, but he just can't help. It's like that 10 pounds of stuff, trying to put it into a 5-pound bag. He still ended up saying twice, well, if we intended to spend it, well, that would be something different. They don't intend to spend it on the sheriff. They could, but they won't. He just couldn't help himself. Yeah. The truth comes out anyway. It's like Keith Heck speaking. Then suddenly he says something, you go, oh, well, what do you mean? Oh, well, I'll just stop talking. Good plan, Keith.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, back to their video only.
Again, it sounds like we're talking about robbing Peter to pay Paul. And this isn't Peter's money to begin with. This was unanticipated windfall revenues.
They don't look happy.
It's not part of the public works budget. Next year, of course, it will be. And my concern with deferring this discussion until the next fiscal year's budget hearings is that at that point it will no longer be considered windfall revenue. It will be considered part of public works money. The money will already be in Peter's bank account, and we're asking to take and give it to Paul. But at this point, that money is windfall revenue.
Yeah. Well, and you know what's happening there right now, Dale? That blank look, and then you're looking down. He is loading the queue. That's what he's doing. Because he needs to have a ready shower of obfuscation to put out there. And this reminds me of Jonathan Gruber. It's the line in
yeah.
Yeah. Yes. It's one of my favorites because it is so much what government does. And that is that a lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. And in other things that he said, he indicates how you get to that lack of transparency. And one is you just don't tell people things. But the other thing is that you put out a tablet telling people what is going on in said bill that's as thick as the Bible. And yes, you know darn well that no one's going to read it. The other way you do it is verbally, by spewing forth just a endless array of meaningless vibrations in the air, and everybody goes, wow, well, that really looks and sounds intelligent. And then they go, oh, okay, well, obviously he knows what he's talking about, and I don't. So, and Simon depends on that. If not for that, Simon is nothing without that. And
one of the things that we do on this show is, I've said since so many times in meetings with by myself, okay, the only person, you, me, and the camera. But I've sat there also with other people, and I said, wow, did you catch that? Including so-called news people. Catch what? Well, when he said, and so I buried my wife. Oh, no, I didn't catch that. Well, are you in the meeting? Are you listening to what they're saying? Yeah. Because they let out these little exclamations every once in a while. You go, oh, that's interesting. It's like the subtlety of when Roy Lindsay was on with Bill Meyer, and Roy Lindsay said, well, I'm going to this meeting, to this thing with Bill Meyer, and I'm going to set the record straight because there's a lot of falsehoods out there and all the rest of this stuff. And so Bill Meyer says to Roy Lindsay from the Grants Pass City Council, well, I was talking with Dale, and he says something about $105 million. And he says, well, we won't have that much to spend. That's the maximum amount of our indebtedness. And it's so subtle. And Bill goes, oh,
it's all clear to me now. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for, and Roy was bragging the day before about how he was going to go and set the record straight. Why, if people would just listen and stop saying no, nope, why, everything would be, they can't help themselves.
Yeah, but you know what?
The maximum indebtedness. Great. Oh, that's much better. Now I understand.
We've made this, analogy a number of times where you can get three people watching something taking place and their read on it is going to be totally different because, let's say we're watching a basketball game. One of the people likes basketball. The other two people are baseball fans or they don't care about sports at all. And then at the end, when you ask them what happened, the guy who's a sports fan is going to be able to tell you all the details of what happened. And the other guys are going to be missing in action because they don't realize the significance of certain moves. And this is what you get when you have a reporter who, most of these people, they're getting paid a very low wage. Their two basic jobs are one, to look good and to go out and do the grunt work that no one else wants to do, getting these stories. And they come back and reiterate them in 2-second sound bites that have a multitude of changing video in the background that is just, more tantamount to confusion than it is information. And
but the Courier, this thing over my shoulder, the Courier, Sean Hall does a little different. Remember the good news? It was good news that there's action in Washington, D.C. about SRS payments because the story to me is the commissioners have been telling us there's no action, no action, no action. You can now give up hope. The story was that's false. And when I asked them, why would you say, well, of course, we know what's going on. You've just now admitted that you knew what was going on, but you were telling us the opposite. They can't help themselves. And the story written by Sean Hall started off with the sentence. Do you remember the sentence? It started off with, it's like non-secure rural schools.
Yes.
But this is supposed to be a news story. What the heck kind of reporting is this?
Well, I think you put your finger on it. It's editorializing, but,
Well, now we do it, but we're commenting about the news. That's a little different than purporting to be a reporter or pulling stories, as Dan Mancuso has says that he's done at the IV News, because his advertisers don't like the stories. See, once the Courier gets together with the Chamber of Commerce to put together a candidates forum with the Chamber of Commerce, and once Dan Mancuso gets together with the IV Chamber of Commerce to put together a candidates forum, what are we going to expect out of these? It's going to be, well, how close to business as usual are you going to run? Not. What do you mean not? Yeah. It's like Margaret Goodwin saying, well, I'm going to make a motion. Okay, good. Yeah, I'm making a motion to amend everything that's happened. Oh.
Well, listen, you see what you're talking about here is the difference between transparency and a lack of transparency. So the board wants us to believe that there is no action on SRS and that's over. It's never, ever coming back. Well, that's a lack of transparency because they know the truth about it.
They said they did.
And yet they're telling us something different. So,
and the Courier could report that. They could say, hey, here's several quotes from that. I mean, there's a dozen quotes. I could supply them with the quotes. And here's what they said. And here's what they're saying today. The Courier could, except what will happen with their wonderful access to the public relations releases coming out of the county commissioners. The Courier is specifically responsible. I'm talking about Kevin Whittison, because I name names. He's the editor of the Courier, and Sean Hall now, it used to be Jim Moore, directly attributable to these two fellows are any danger that this county is in because they're not even reporting when we're being told lies by these guys. It could go toward public safety. They're not reporting it. They're choosing not to tell you.
Yeah, well, and they're complicit with the Board of Commissioners, and even though the Board of Commissioners knows what the truth is, they're telling you something else. In other words, they're deceiving you for what they believe is your own good, or maybe even more nefarious, their own good. Like they know that that any money that comes in is going to benefit them more than it benefits the people of the county, generally speaking. But that is what they're pushing for. And the correct information about what's happening with SRS or what's happening with ONC shared receipts money, that is information that you want to suppress because it may affect the outcome of an election. And that's how deep this goes. It's corruption. We don't call it corruption often enough, but that is indeed what it is. It is
corruption reaches all the way down to the Daily Courier.
Yeah. Well.
Okay, so now you watch to see how they handle this thing about what happened on Friday. On Friday, all this time with the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, all this time. Well, you know, here's what they've said. No, that's not what they said. Yes, that's what they've said. No, that's not what they said. When Eder Campuzano was here and reporting for the Courier, he called them too, the OGEC. They told him the same thing they told me. They told him the same thing they told me and told Sandy Casanelli. We reported it to you, that they've been found guilty. And next is the penalty phase. They're in the penalty phase. No, we're not. No, we're not. No, we're not. Nobody's, well, how can you possibly say that? All three of them are, well, what's the matter with you? You're saying that we're, no, they never did that. Investigators supposedly found out we were doing something and we were doing nothing. And it's a lie. It's a lie. It's a lie. It's a lie. Like Cheryl Walker said, why don't you just look in the mirror, Mr. Matthews, and you'll see that you're a liar and all the rest of this. Now, because they were in the penalty phase, they're not in the penalty phase anymore. The penalty's already been handed out. They were. They lied to us. Now, is the Courier going to indicate anywhere? Dan Mancuso is not going to do it. The CAJO doesn't even realize this, and certainly that the sneak preview is not going to be reporting this because they think Cheryl's the best of all commissioners in history, right? And so are they going to tell you that not only have they been given a penalty, and it's nothing, it's nothing, a letter of education. They said, we already know what we're doing. This fits in with what, yes, we know, yes, we know, yes, we know. I know we're breaking the law and I don't care, says Keith Hick. And so now that she's been found, not only was she already found guilty, but now they've handed out the penalty. Is she going to say, no, they haven't? She might. How's the Courier going to report this, Mike? They've been lying to us.
I'm guessing they probably, I don't know, maybe they will report it.
But put a happy face on it?
Well, they could just as easily not report it at all and say we covered that back in December.
Yeah, it'd be easier. Yeah. All right, two more short clips.
They can give it to Paul. But at this point, that money is windfall revenue. And it's not that we're taking something away from Public Works.
Well, that was the end of that. Okay, all right. It's not that we're taking something away from Public Works. Now what they're going to do is they're going to jump over to watch how convoluted this is at this public hearing. They can't run a public hearing anymore because it's not. There are certain specific state rules. Why do they even bother making rules? Because of commissioners like these that don't understand the basics. Sorry to be so critical. They don't understand the most basic element of a public hearing. You're supposed to hear from the public before you take the vote. And then you ignore them, and then you take your vote.
But that's not why these rules are in place. This Oregon Ethics Commission does not care at all about ethics. They don't. We like to believe that they do, but they don't at all. They're the exact same people that are on this board. They're dirty, they're scummy, and they're corrupt. All of them. State level, all these people, they're all bad people. They're all bad eggs. And so you're going to get a token judgment out of them about somebody that we see to be dirty and nasty. And next year, when some fiscal conservatives in there, they'll actually come down hard on those people when complaints are put in. So that's the way this board operates. So the rules. they don't care about the rules. The rules are simply there. I mean, they're a relic of a bygone era when they actually did care about the rules. Now they're just there so that they can make token judgments on people or actually punish people that they do not like.
We're on our own. And how the heck do they hand out a letter of education to someone that says, I'm already educated, I already know the rules? And Wally Hicks sat in on all these meetings with them. They said they don't want to take Wally Hicks and blame him for anything. He's a lawyer, but he's an elected legal counsel. And there are rules in there that says, well, we're going to follow through on this one. You can bet on that. You can depend on that. Because now that they've handed out the penalties, Wally Hicks is just as guilty as the rest of them. Wally Hicks, hello, Wally, you're just as guilty as the others. You sat in on these meetings and you knew that it was wrong and you didn't stop them. Well, I can't stop them. Sure you can. You remember what the Oregon Government Ethics Commission said about that guy? He said, well, what was I supposed to do? Do you remember what he said, what they said to him, Mike?
Yeah, he said, get up and walk out.
Because you're breaking the law.
That's right.
Well, he didn't have the guts to do that.
Not that he actually cared whether or not the guy did that or not, but he had the guy under his thumb and he had to look, good on tape by telling the guy that. That's all that was.
Yeah. All right. So watch the way that they just can't help themselves. They can't help themselves. Watch how they back into the rest of public. Now, they've had the meeting of the budget committee. And they sent them away. So they're not there to listen to public comments before they take their vote, right? And now Cheryl wants to go straight on to the next thing and get that mayor up there real quick to explain to all of us how we're going to have to carry AK-47s around town. She's really interested in getting that mayor up there. She's got no apologies to make to the public, but she's fallen all over herself to apologize to the mayor because this is the way that Cheryl Walker is running a public hearing. Listen to this. Even Simon can't put up with this.
3A. So we have invited Chief Landis, Aaron Kubik, City Manager, and Mayor Darren Fowler, and I think we'll take the mayor first if he would like to address this issue in regards to this jail contract.
Commissioner Walker, something's not right. You've got there's specific things that need to happen here with this hearing, and I think the finance staff is really interested in that you make sure we're doing it right. So what is it that we need?
It's just the law, that's all.
So we
sorry.
open the public hearing.
I missed it. Mayor Fowler, my apologies. This full calendar here.
Mm-hmm. She's confused. She knows the rules, but doesn't know the rules. Right.
Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing on the Josephine County supplemental budget. Thank you for reminding me. And we have Arthur Hare, our finance director. Do you want to say anything in addition to what we said this morning? Okay. All right. Public hearing is open for public comment. Who would like to comment at this time? Sandy Casanelli.
Sandy Casanelli, Merlin, Oregon. You know, it's pretty outrageous that we're having public comment after the vote for the supplemental budget. That doesn't really make any sense. Normally, you have it before the vote, so you can consider what the public has to say. Now, we're just wasting breath, but I will waste breath anyways. What you did today was egregious. These windfall revenues should not be carryovers and then dumped into a fund balance for the current budget. What you are doing is you are dumping it, you are allocating those funds to the Public Works Department rather than where it should go, to the sheriff. This is giving even more authority to Public Works than you are your sheriff. We don't have a Public Works fiscal emergency. We have a public safety fiscal emergency. And it is irresponsible of you people to allocate this money to Public Works first, especially since it's been a way back in 2012, you gave $425,000 for this fund. That's HB 4175. You haven't done anything since. It's a legitimate use of money that you guys have not been allocating money for this. And if you read on here, it says that out of this supplemental budget, you made sure you got more than $200,000 for the ISF fund, so you guys can go have a happy time out of the county on travel expenses and meals and other things. This is outrageous that you would fund the sheriff last instead of funding him first. This is your responsibility. It is not a fiscal crisis. It is a crisis, a fictitious crisis that you are making. You have the ability to change this, and you steadfastly refuse to give the sheriff the money that he needs. This is outrageous. The sheriff should be here fighting for his money as well. Not good. Very, very, very not good. This allows a $5 million contingency. Bravo. We should have that just like we had it for this year. But you know what? This is windfall money that can be allocated, and you are not allocating it. Shame on you.
Before I move ahead, I want to dispel some ignorance in regards to this funding.
What?
Yes.
That's a public hearing? I want to dispel some ignorance? This lady's got to go. Well, Mike, we saw you sitting there in the audience. You want to reiterate some of what you said to them? You were hot, buddy.
Well,
in a political way.
Yeah, I was just, I was really angry at that point. I had some prepared comments that were very much in line with what Margaret Goodwin was saying, but I just wanted to tell him, hey, listen, I got your number. Clearly, no emergency will go to waste here, and that we use these things for the purpose of ginning up fear and passing levies and things of that nature. So we don't, when we have the opportunity to take money that is free for us to use and spend it for supplementing the sheriff, and under a public safety fiscal emergency, one would think one would do that. And yet they still make the excuse, well, you can't rob from Peter to pay Paul. And, what if some potholes show up and we don't have any money to fill the potholes with? I just, here's what you can expect to show up here later this month when they open the budget committee. They're not going to discuss this in any substantive way other than to permanently shoot it down. They're formulating the verbiage right now that has the best psychological effect. How are we going to come up with something that's better than rob from Peter to pay Paul? This is the biggest problem the board has at this point. The rest of it is smooth sailing.
Well, my guess is that they're going to get Rob Brandis to come forward from Public Works and talk a lot about how we've got failing infrastructure. Unless we do something about it immediately, those police patrols aren't even going to be able to get to Cave Junction.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. That's right. Even though Highway 199 is a either state or federal controlled and maintained highway. Does
it matter?
Yes, I know. It doesn't matter. Yes.
Okay, so we've got your remedy. You know what the remedy is. That's crystal clear to you, the remedy. And we've mentioned several times what could be done for 6 deputies out of this thing for 5 years, just with this money. And that doesn't include the money that comes in for economic development that's going to supplement the budgets of non-economic development departments. It doesn't indicate anything to do with, and the sheriff told us that he could spend that ISF money, he could spend the toner and the paper money better than the county's ideas for it. So you could give him that money, and she was right. It sounded like a little hyperbole. Well, you want to go off on trips. I was in the meetings where they were talking about, well, what they're going to do with that money. It's the lion's share of the discretionary income that they have to do fun stuff with, to go off on trips to Washington, D.C. This is how they're spending. You thought you were giving money to the sheriff or to the animal shelter. 10% of that was skimmed off the top. What? Yeah. Yes.
Well,
10%
and that's
off the top for the commissioners to spend any way they want to.
Right, and that's probably another reason why they don't like this idea of taking this money and spending it on the sheriff, is because there is no ISF skim.
Their 10% skim.
Yeah, they don't get that.
Follow the money, and when the commissioners are skimming money off the top, that's the time to. Don't call in the state. The state's not going to do anything. We'll give them a letter of education. Oh, please. We already know. They already know. They say that they know. We're just going to have to stop them. It's going to take a long time. Look at all the people they've surrounded themselves with. Look at Arthur O'Hare. It's going to take quite a while to clean up this mess. It's the product of generations of, Mike put it, corruption. We're going to fix that, and we're going to start with the money. And we're going to have to get in and see those records. Well, you get 2 fiscal conservatives. They will see the records. You get 1, and they won't. It's up to you.